Next up, we're going to have Chad Sweet, our city administrator, and he's going to talk a little bit about how we can be more resilient as a city. And it's great to have Chad follow Meg and Tom Horning because they gave some really, really important information. And there's couple pieces of it that I want to emphasize tonight for all of you folks. You hear a theme of what's the most likely scenario? What scenario do we want to prepare for? And you hear about the medium to large size event. Well, obviously in any size event, there's going to be a lot of damage. They just told you about a lot of the homes that may be destroyed and infrastructure. But as human beings, we can survive. We have areas in Gearhart that have high ground. And it's important that we educate folks on where you can evacuate. And we want to make sure these evacuation maps are updated, and we want to make sure they're clearly marked where people can evacuate. There's several places to evacuate for folks that live in West Gearhart, and several places to evacuate for folks that live in East Gearhart. So we want to make sure that we prepare for the most likely size event. And the good news is we can survive. And Chad's going to talk to you a little bit about how we can survive. So Chad's going to go over two things. How can Gearhart become resilient together? And how can we fund a new emergency response and resiliency station? So I want to give a warm welcome to Chad Sweet.
Thank you very much. So we've learned a lot about the tsunami. We've learned a lot about what we can and can't do. But what Gearhart City Council really wants to do is increase resiliency across the board. And that does include a new fire station. Being able to give our volunteers and our firefighters the tools to be able to respond to you on a daily basis is very important. Or on the 2007 storm, we remember that. We learned a lot of lessons from that, and we've done some things to prepare for that. If you remember, we were without power for a week, trees were down everywhere. We now store fuel. We now have a plan that incorporates the things that we learned there. We learned how to get rid of a lot of the spoiled food that was in people's houses. And we've got power generation available now, so we've learned some things. The City Council wants us to be able to recover from all types of catastrophes and respond to daily emergencies. A new station will increase our ability to better respond to disaster scenarios. More resiliency equals more capacity to save lives, faster economic recovery. It's not just about the tsunami. If we can get back up into business, our downtown businesses will be able to start selling coffee again. They'll be a part of this. If we can have a fire station and a group of people to help get us back into shape, whether it's a storm, ice storm, tsunami, then we're able to have dance classes again. We're able to go to the bowling alley. Those things are important to those people who own those businesses, so there's also an economic impact. An earthquake scenario, roadways may be intact, clearing of roadways will be a priority. George Priest says, yeah, there's going to be some roadway damage around here for tsunami and a big earthquake, and it's probably going to be a big earthquake. We're not exactly sure what size tsunami is going to follow it, but the whole area is going to move. It's not going to be like Alaska where you have these fault lines and you have these giant areas where you won't be able to drive through. There will be, and we should be able to move around a bit. Is it possible that the worst case scenario might happen? Sure, but it's more likely something more manageable to happen. Again, 50 feet. McCormick Gardens Road, we've talked about that area behind us as far as tsunami. Remember, subsidence is kind of a big deal also. The ground's going to come down a little bit. And those of us that have been back in McCormick Gardens Road quite a bit, you know it's already swampy back there now. Well, it goes down 3 feet. It's going to be a permanent lake, a new lake. So evacuating back up into that area where it's first going to flood is problematic. We've also heard some things about multiple stations, smaller stations spread around town. We've discussed that with some fire professionals out of Portland, an ex-fire chief out of Portland. And a lot of smaller stations spread without town is just not economically feasible. It's expensive to build buildings, and if you're going to do it once, great. If you're going to do it 3 or 4 times, it's much more expensive. Not only that, some of those things are a little misrepresented. Those of you that have ever been a volunteer firefighter or a firefighter, you have to know where to respond to. If you've got your trucks and things spread out throughout a community, where do you go when you're going to go, heart attack call? Do you go get the rescue truck that's over there? Where are the other people going to follow? We have to think about responding to people on the average everyday sort of scenario. We've had 485 calls this year, right? Or last year. Those were 485 scenarios where people needed help. And we got there pretty quickly. We do a good job with our fire department here. So we have to be centrally located and able to respond to those sorts of things on a daily basis. Can we prepare? Peace of mind. This is not an impossible situation. Throw the worst case, most likely scenario at us. Yeah, it's going to be difficult, but we'll make it. We've got some pretty scrappy people. If we put the fire station in the right place, they'll get there. You'll get there. People came out of the woodwork in 2007. Everybody grabbed the chainsaws that had one, started cutting, coming together. I met some pretty neat people. Took me a while to get here. I had to cut my way out of my neighborhood. Took us about half a day on the one road, Mannion. But we got here. And these folks, again, they're scrappy. They'll get here. Cannon Beach, Seaside, they have both recently hired emergency managers. This is a cultural change. This is starting to take effect. We're no longer ignoring it'll never happen, okay? We've got a lot of good science now that shows that it will. And we shouldn't say it's only going to be the worst case scenario. That sells books, and that turns the media on to big, gigantic stories and gets us all excited and sells advertising. But that's not the case here. We can survive. I've been impressed with what Cannon Beach and Seaside has been doing. They've got a lot of small projects that they're trying to do. They've got foodstuffs stored. They've got emergency medical. They've got a medical reserve corps that might not even have anything to do with a tsunami, but has to do with all the other type of calamity that we can get ourselves into, whether it be a school bus or a bus or an airplane or all the things that can happen. They've got a group of volunteer people that are a lot of retired type of professionals around here that can offer us some great help. A lot of retired nurses and doctors around here. We have medical supplies stored around town. I don't know if you know that. We have a group of CERT volunteers, mostly nurses and practitioners, that have come up with and done a very good job of spending very little money and having a whole lot of supplies stored up at high points around town. So that if something did happen, we're able to respond. And I'd like to thank the CERT team for the work that they do. They're a group of individuals that have been... We're not thinking it's never going to happen, and they're not going to think it's going to be the worst case scenario, but they're doing their thing. I think that's great. Connex boxes. We're working on a project right now. The city of Gearhart has funded a couple of Connex boxes, which is that big giant thing that's out here, that's sealed up, usually on shipboard containers. We're buying 2 more. We're going to put them up in a high location. We're going to store some food stuff, some water stuff, some water purification equipment, some tarps, some things like that. We used a ton of tarps after the 2007 storm. FEMA came by, dropped off. We don't even really know where they came from. There was Dutch cooler, bless his heart. Won't ask many questions where he got the materials, but we had tarps. We had the tools to be able to help protect our property and got us up and going much faster. Resilience. What is resilience? Again, it's a planning environment. Resilience refers more or less to the ability of an organism or community to withstand and recover normal functioning after disturbance. Really quick slide here. This is called a resilience bell curve. All right? We have over here on the left-hand side the initial condition of the community. Then we have some sort of an event. 2007 storm, tsunami, or what have you. We have then 3 arrows: high resilience, low resilience, and no resilience at all. We're going to go down. Things are going to be difficult for a period of time, but again, with our scrappy folks and you, we are going to be able to begin to recover. But it's in how much preparation we've done in advance that makes the biggest difference in all of this. Low resilience and no resilience, they're going to go down, and they're going to get into the disaster threshold, and then they're going to suffer in that disaster threshold for a period of time. That's where businesses aren't making any money. That's where people can't get to schools. That's really a tough time. But if we're low resilience, which I think Gearhart's kind of in that area right now, we're in the lower section, eventually we'll get out. We've got some foodstuffs, we've got some volunteers, and we've got people that'll help. If we can get to high resilience and make some decisions for the future of Gearhart, I'm going to be able to sleep better. Bill's going to be able to sleep better, and maybe you folks will have a little bit of peace of mind also. This is something that weighs on us all the time, and trying to weigh this out of what's best for your community. Do you do something, or do you do nothing at all? And I think because of the situation and everybody thinking that the worst case scenario was the only thing that was going to happen, we've kind of done nothing at all for a long time, but now we're starting to see that cultural change. So we create resilience by reducing exposures to hazard through our planning. Reducing people's vulnerability to hazard events, we prepare. Develop redundancy in systems with mutual aid agreements with Seaside, Cannon Beach, all of that. We've already got those in place and we use them all the time. Seaside has a fire, Gearhart's the first to go. Gearhart has a fire, Seaside comes our way. It's the kind of the planning that we do. Plan for continuity, go bags. Don't raise your hand. How many of you have go bags? Okay, you raise your hands. All right? Just having 3 days of supplies, don't get overwhelmed with it. Just get 3 days of supplies and you are in much better shape. But what if your fire department had another bunch of supplies that could take care of maybe 1,000 people for another week? That's possible, depending on the decisions that we make. Plan recovery for resilience. How do we rebuild? Safe to fail things. Well, okay, so we're going to have an earthquake, and thankfully we don't have sewer. Septic is going to fare pretty well, I think. Right? That's cool. Other communities are going to be down for years. We're going to be pretty good.
As long as it doesn't go through your house.
Yeah, well, take that. So, but water's going to take some time, but water's much easier to repair than sewer, but we'll get there. So, learning from events, learning from all of this, learning from these professionals, it's kind of an exciting time. Oh, now it gets boring. I'm going to talk a little bit about the cost and the money for these sorts of things. And I'm going to try to make up some time because I think we're a little bit behind, but this is important. We have 3 types of financing, maybe even more, that we could really go through. One more slide, please. Gearhart cannot afford to build a fire station. We don't have the monies. Gearhart's tax rate is $1.50 per thousand. You're welcome. But it does not leave a lot of room. We're kind of shoestring on a lot of things. We've got a very small staff here at Gearhart. Per capita, it's probably smaller than any of the cities around. But we make it work. And I think it's good. We're going to have to go for financing, and we've got a couple of options here. General obligation bonds, which we've already been through for the water treatment facility. Okay, that started at 7, and then due to circumstances and appeals and changes in building code and changes in arsenic, we had to go for another 4, brought us up to 11. Currently, I think we've got 5.9 remaining. We've refinanced once, saving the city almost $400,000 in that loan. And we're performing well. Water rates are good, $39 every 2 months, not bad. And the water system is working, and we should be proud of that. It's a beautiful facility. General obligations bonds is the least expensive way for a city like Gearhart to raise money. General obligation bonds are best and the least expensive because it's based on a tax system. You're taxed per thousand, and the tax system around here is pretty robust. I think we've got over 500, just in assessed value, over $580 million worth of property. In real market, it's close to $800 million in property value in Gearhart proper. You've also got full faith and credit bonds, which cities would go to the state or others for loans. Those are not as good a deal as general obligation bonds normally, because general obligation bonds are safe and people like to invest in them. And then you got revenue bonds. Like if we could have done that maybe for the water treatment facility where your rates would have raised to pay for the bonds, but they chose not to do that because the money was less expensive by going with a GO or a general obligation bond. And I don't know if any of you that have used the services of Gearhart Fire Department, but I'm pretty sure you never received a bill. And I don't think they want to get into the billing atmosphere at all. So current debt service, this graph shows kind of where we've been, starting back in 2006. And right now, as things stand, in 2000, sorry, this is even really small for me, time for glasses, Chad. 2025, our rates will go down from, this is addition to our taxes, the $1.50. We pay about $1.30 per thousand for the water treatment facility. In 2025, that'll go down to about 40 cents per thousand. So we're starting to knock it down, and I'm going to start looking at, thank you, Matt. Made it big for me. We're going to start looking at refinancing some of those bonds also to hopefully save our money because the interest rates are looking pretty good. And the neat thing about general obligation bonds is they seem to like tumultuous times. The rates stay low. Well, here we are. Estimated cost range, if we were to borrow $6 million for a fire station, starting at 2020, ending at 2040, it'd be about 66 cents per thousand. I put $11 million up there as another opportunity because we're not sure. We have to get into some negotiations depending on what site we pick. I don't think we're going to get close to $11 million, but I wanted to have the top of where I think we might be. And so that would add about another $1.21 per thousand if we had to go all the way to $11 million, which that's not something we're heading in the direction for, but that's going to be some decisions that you're going to have to make. Cushion the interest of where it's currently at, plus or minus 1.5%. Interest about 42 or 4.2 million versus 7.7 million. I'll be available for questions afterwards, and we'll have these slides in there. And we'll get into more detail later. So debt service, 6 million, 5.19, all inclusive. The interest rates are not quite that high, but that also includes all the fees that we're going to be paying to make this happen, which is about $100,000 in addition. Interest, we see it there. Total P&L is about $10 million for a $6 million bond. So approximately $66,000 or 66 cents per thousand. $500,000 home, about $330 per year. $11 million, a $500,000 home is about $605 per year. Okay. So a total construction for a new fire station built with the new requirements, which are quite heavy. This is critical infrastructure. This is not like your house. I know the water treatment facility looks pretty, but it has a ton of concrete, almost 20 feet underneath it. Plus the tennis courts have over 60 stone columns drilled down over 40 feet each underneath that tennis court to hold it up in case of a little bit of shake. That's the kind of resiliency we're looking at and that we must prepare for, and we have to with building codes. The state of Oregon mandates it. This is critical infrastructure. So these buildings are expensive. So we're looking at maybe 4.9, and I'm always going to try to estimate high for you. I don't want to get there at the end of this in 3 years and go, oops, I was wrong. I don't want to over-promise and under-deliver. I don't think any of us want to do. The council's very in tune to that. So 4.9 for a building. That's high, but that's likely. The more time we wait every year, it's about 5 to 10% increase, I think. I just built a deck out of cedar. I should have bought gold. There is some options, some things that we're going to have to think about and talk more about. The fire engine, we have one that needs replacing. NFPA dictates that, so we may have to add in another $500,000 for a fire engine. Most expensive car I've ever driven. Another option is City Hall remodel. We're not talking about adding City Hall into this at this point. We want to concentrate on a resiliency station, not a City Hall. City Hall, we can make that beautiful 1970s building work for a little while longer. And I think with $200,000, we can also expand the meeting room. We can add a couple of offices because we are growing slowly. You've seen that temporary building that we had to put out there. And get rid of that temporary building and make City Hall work for some years to come. So we have to replace it. Cost of issuing bond, about $100,000 total. And so you're looking at 5.7 on the low side for all the projects that we're talking about. It does not include cost for land acquisition. 2 of the pieces of property, one of them is the one we're on now, is fairly affordable. The park, as difficult as that is also affordable potentially. And then you've got High Point, which we're going to have to get into some negotiations. We're not sure exactly where that's going to end up. Could be expensive, but we're going to work on that. So we don't know exactly. Cost of earthwork at the current Pacific Way location, this location here. I don't know if you know this, but we are on fill.
look at, when you leave or you drive by in the daylight, look at Trails End Art Center. That's real Gearhart. That's where Gearhart was way back in the day when you look at those old pictures and the wooden walkways. And it's hard to recognize because we don't see the dip. That's the dip. This was all built on film. We don't quite know what's underneath it, but we know the walls and this fire station doesn't like it. So we're gonna have to dig down, rebuild, and take care of that. And we'll go into it a little bit later, but it'll also be, how do you operate a fire station when you've destroyed your fire station after knocking it down? So we're gonna have to build some temporary structures in this location. Somewhere we can house the fire station, and maybe Public Works can use it again in the future. I think that would be the way to go. It'd be a prudent way to spend money. But maybe build some pole barns and things like that, put fire trucks in them, design the station, do the station, and then move the trucks out of the pole barn, back into here, and then go ahead and give that back to Public Works with some new facilities. So it's definitely, this is one of the more expensive places to do what we need to do. So what have we learned so far?
I got that part, Chad.
Matt's got this part.
Chad, sweet.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chad. That was kind of a crash course real quick on bonds and stuff. Remember, we'll have all that information online so people can digest it a little bit. It is a little confusing. But I just wanted to do just a quick recap. We just had some wonderful speakers. Over the last 3 years, the committee has done an excellent job of researching, working with some of these state agencies and experts to do some research. And then we learned a lot so far tonight as well. So what have we learned so far? Well, regardless of where you would want a new fire station, the current fire station was built in 1958, and it needs to be upgraded. Bottom line. Doesn't matter, considering different locations, but just this building itself needs to be upgraded. We also learned about the most likely tsunami event. Gearhart can survive a medium to large tsunami event scenarios. We can find high ground and we can save lives. It's possible. One thing we learned from Meg and Tom Horning, this is very important because a lot of people can't conceptualize how a tsunami would come in. Tsunami will likely not cause a giant wave that crashes over the dune, but more likely in Gearhart, a surge of water that floods the low-lying areas first and then rises to a certain height. So when we talk about what height that might rise to in a medium to large event, I believe Tom Horning said around 50 feet, so that means the flooding will go up to 50 feet. It doesn't mean a giant wave that crashes over the dune area. Talking about resiliency a little bit and in evacuation, Marion Avenue, that front dune ridge there and part of Ocean, is likely high enough in some areas to avoid flooding. So that's why if you look at your evacuation maps, there's evacuation spots in that area. There's other evacuation spots though as well, and you want to be aware of where you live, particularly the best and fastest place to get to high ground. Obviously there's going to be a lot of damage, but if we can save some human lives by educating people where to go, and you can get with your neighbors and everybody and find out what's the safest place for you. There's evacuation areas on Summit Avenue, as well as on the east side of Highway 101 as well, if you can get up to that higher ground and avoid that flooding. One thing that we do want to touch on a little bit that the committee has learned through Tom Horning and some of the others is that if an event happens, a tsunami happens, the water in this area here, where Tom Horning said a lot of the flooding will occur, will recede after about 3 or 4 hours, okay? So once that water recedes, people that made it to high ground are probably going to need some emergency response and medical attention. So that's where our CERT team, that's where our Gearhart volunteers, fire department will kick into gear and hopefully save some lives. Emergency headquarters and event coordination is a must. We heard that from Meg Reed tonight. What other cities are doing to be more resilient. And one of the reasons we'd like a new fire station is to have an event coordination and emergency headquarters. that could be in a place where people could come for medical attention. It can be our, is it EOC? EOC headquarters, command center. It's also, folks, one thing we have to think about, it's also about how resilient we want to be. And it's really up to the public to determine that. Do we want to prepare for the most likely scenario? Do we want to just give up? That's a decision that we have to make as a community. Really, what event we want to prepare for. So let's talk about some new locations. What this new station will be? Well, it'll obviously be a home for our brave Gearhart Volunteer Fire Department. It'll be a home for our Gearhart Police Department and emergency responders. It could be storage of emergency medical supplies and equipment. And like I said, it could be headquarters and a gathering spot for city emergencies. Not just tsunamis, but any kind of city emergency, storms, or anything else that might happen. What the new station will not be, it will not be new offices for the city administrator and staff. Sorry, Chad. You're not getting a new office.
I was working on it.
And you're not getting one with an ocean view, sorry. It will definitely not be a new city hall like was proposed in 2006. Many of you might remember a fire station was on the ballot in 2006. It was a gigantic deluxe station, had a town hall in there. It didn't look very Gearharty. Didn't have that character. So it's definitely not a city hall. We want to make it as minimum size footprint as possible because we know we want to save money. But we want to give people adequate facilities. And it's definitely not going to be a new chamber or offices for the city council or the mayor. So I don't have an office currently, and I'm not getting a new one. Sorry to me. Okay, we're going to talk about 3 concepts now for emergency response and resiliency station. Our first location, oh, sorry, got one more slide. Just really want to quick touch on some of the locations the committee did not choose and why they did not choose them, because this is something I get a lot. Why wouldn't you build one over here or over there? So I want to talk about a few things, and some of this has been covered already. The East Gearhart Hillside, where Tom Horning talked about earlier, the committee did not choose that location or did not put that in their top 3 because it's isolated due to permanent flooding in case of a tsunami, so it would be impossible to get to or get out from. Some of the areas, as Tom Horning said, are prone to slides. And then also, the cost of a causeway or infrastructure, a road to get up there, would probably be too high. It would probably cost double what a station would be over here. Also, Highway 101. There was property on Highway 101 they considered. The unfortunate part about Highway 101 is it is in the tsunami inundation zone. We already have a location right here that's in the tsunami inundation zone, so it wouldn't make sense to buy another piece of property that's in the tsunami inundation zone if we've already owned a piece of property in the tsunami inundation zone. So if we choose to want to rebuild here, it would make more sense than buying another piece of property. Third location that they decided wouldn't be adequate would be over by Delray Beach Access Road. A couple problems with that. It's too remote of a location. It's got poor access to the majority of the community. It's also too close to Herdick Satellite Station, which is on Highway 101. And then the property also might not be available. They may be building a housing development there as well, so we might not be able to acquire that property. So first up, we have Gearhart Park Station. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Gearhart Park Station. You can see there that the building is a 1-story building. It's actually built into the side of the park. So it would be built on the east side of the park, right on Marion. So there would actually be a subterranean garage driveway to pull vehicles in. If you look at the building, you can see what you would see from the west side if you were in the park. And then also from the south side where you would see how it's built in to the actual park itself. We're going to go over some stats on the Gearhart Park Station. And you see here an aerial view. with some landscaping and a basic design for the building. So the elevation of this building would be around 50 feet at the building site. The building type itself would be a 13,000 square foot single level. And if we wanted to, if we got the right feedback and wanted to build there, we could do some possible vertical evacuation to the roof. The design would be to minimize visual impact and footprint. Landscaping, we'd be able to extend and enhance the west and north parts of the park, irrigate the grass there, and plant new trees to create open space. So if you see that yellow square, no, I'm good. If you see that green square, within that square you can see some lines. And so the lighter color green is basically where part of the park is right now. The rest of it is covered with shrubs and trees and then goes downhill a little bit. So the plan would be to actually extend the park to the west and basically create more park. So as far as park loss, what would we lose on the current park? Well, it'd be pretty minimal actually. The total net park loss would only be around 0.3 acres, so about 3/10 of an acre. So you're actually creating an extension of the park and trying not to lose some of the park. The zoning for Park Station, the county would need to approve removal of a deed restriction as they did with the water treatment facility. So it's the same process. They'd have to the planning commission would have to rezone the park property to public, semi-public. Cost-wise, estimate currently probably around $5 to $7 million for construction. So the cost on a bond per 1,000 of home value would be 55 cents to 77 cents. So to compare, a $400,000 home would be assessed about $220 to $308 per year if a bond were to pass by a public vote. The geology of the park station, it's very stable. It's packed sand, so there'd be minimum prep work required. Dagami, we may need a possible exception for, sorry, can you hear me? We got now?
Yeah.
Okay, we're good. We may need a possible exception because like we talked about, the station's at about 50 feet. So that's about the maximum for the large size tsunami event. So we're right on the border. So we may need an exception to build there. Proximity to the population and volunteers is very good. It's fairly close to where we're at now. It's got good routes and easy to get to. Resiliency-wise, it's fairly good. Most likely would be high enough to not be flooded by a medium to large event. As I said, it's right on the cusp. So there's a good chance that it would be high enough. So that's Gearhart Park Station. Location B, Pacific Way Station. That's the current location right here. That's if we built it right here. Elevation, we're looking at 25 feet at the building site. And before I get into too much here, I do want to give a special thank you to Candace Smith. So Candace actually did the landscaping design for this location, and we asked her to do that because if you look across the street, there's some landscaping that's going to happen right on the sidewalk there. Candace and the Gearhart Homeowners Association are the ones behind that, and Candace designed the landscaping for that area. So if we built on this current location, we'd want the landscaping to match up with what it looks like across the street to make sure it looks great. And so thank you to Candace for doing the landscaping illustration for this particular location. And if it does get chosen, we'd want her to help design that. So the building type for this location, 13,000 square feet, may require 2 stories to accommodate public works. The other thing we have to look out for, like Chad said, is building a temporary structure and facilities would be required during construction. So obviously, we build on this location, we have to find a place to house the volunteers in the meantime and the equipment. Once again, it's designed to minimize visual impact and footprint. Landscaping, like we said, we would plant trees and shrubs to minimize impact and to match the landscaping across the street. Zoning, don't have to worry about zoning because it's already zoned correctly, so no rezoning required. The cost estimate for this location would be about $6 to $8 million for construction. One of the reasons it'd be a little bit more is that we'd have to create some temporary facilities, which is doable, but it would cost a little bit more money. And for that amount, for property taxes, the approximate cost per thousand of assessed home value would be 66 cents to 88 cents. $400,000 home would be assessed at about $264 to $352 per year if a bond were to pass. Geology, so Chad talked about this a little bit. This location is built on fill, so it may require extensive site prep to meet seismic code. That's still a possibility. It would just probably cost extra to make sure that that's done, but certainly doable. Degami, an exception would be required because of the height at 25 feet. Proximity to population and volunteers, obviously very good. We have very good response times from this location. No issues there whatsoever. Resiliency. Resiliency in this location is obviously fair, but it's most likely would be flooded by a medium to large event. So that's one thing that we have to consider. How resilient do we want to be? Tom showed a slide of a large event and how high the water would be. So we do have to take that into consideration as well. And it's just going to be a matter of how resilient do we want to be. Okay, last but certainly not least, we have High Point Station. High Point Station would be built on a hill, which is literally the highest point in Gearhart, and that's why we call it High Point Station. It's a wonderful place to evacuate. It's very close to the Gearhart condos. It's right across the street from the golf course, and it's by the sand trap. You might see me there. So let's talk about elevation at High Point Station. High Point Station, we're looking at 62 to 65 feet high at the building site. Building type would be very similar to if we constructed it here because of the footprint size that we're working with. So it would still be a 13,000 square foot double level building most likely due to the geographic constraints. It's also designed to be minimal visual impact and footprint. We want it to fit in with the neighborhood. We don't want it to stand out. It's got to look like Gearhart. As with the other locations, landscaping is very important. We would plant trees and shrubs to help minimize impact with neighbors and create as much of a residential feel as possible. Zoning. We would need a conditional use from the Planning Commission for government facility, which is possible. Cost would be similar to this location here. It would be about $6 to $9 million. We wanted to put a little bit extra just depending on the construction costs, and obviously we also have to acquire the property. And like Chad said, if this is an area that people want to go for and select this location, then we would get negotiations about the property costs. Property taxes, cost per thousand of home value would be 66 to 99 cents per thousand. A $400,000 home would be assessed about $264 to $396 per year if a bond were to pass. Geology is very stable. It's packed sand again, so it would be minimum prep required. Degami exception, no exception required because of the height. Proximity to population and volunteers, still very good. There's some main arteries, roads in that area, and it's definitely accessible. Resiliency is excellent. It most likely would not be flooded by any size event. Maybe the double extra large 70-footer, but Tom said that's not going to happen, right, Tom? So for probably 95 to whatever percent, it's going to be relatively safe. So those are the three concepts that we have. On the map here, you've got location A, the Gearhart Park Station. You've got location B, the Pacific Way Station. And then you've got location C, High Point Station. So a few things to consider when we start giving feedback, and you're going to get these questionnaires at the end of the meeting. Take your time on them, digest this information, there's a lot of it, you don't have to fill it out tonight. But we want you to rank these three concepts, 1, 2, and 3, in the public questionnaire. That's going to allow us to find out which location everyone supports. These are not final designs that we showed you tonight. They're just ideas and concepts. They can or will be tweaked, altered, or changed. So, during this public feedback process, we may get folks that say, man, I really love this location, but I don't like the design. We want you to write that down. Tell us what you don't like about it. Because we want to get that feedback so that if we get to a final stage, we can use your public feedback to help create the best location station. You may love a design, but not quite love a location, and you might know of a location that's a couple blocks away that would be better, but maybe in the same vicinity. We want to hear about that. When you're ranking these locations, let us know what else you think. Let us know what could be better. Again, these are just concepts so that we can get an idea of what location everyone will support if we were to put a final design in place. At this point, there are no bad ideas. Let's have constructive dialogue on any of these locations. We don't just want to know which one you don't like, we want to know which ones you like and why you like them, because that's going to help us get to a final location and design that's better. Let's try and work together to get every resident of Gearhart to get the correct information and fill out the questionnaire, so we can find out what our community truly wants. So it's really up to all of you, it's up to the committee to make sure that everybody that you know fills out one of these questionnaires. We want to get an accurate account as possible of what the public would support and what the public would vote for, and if it would pass a vote. So we need all of you to help with that. I do need to address one thing. And when you get the questionnaire, you're going to get a packet with all the concepts in there so you can take a look at them. Everything's going to be available online. We also have a frequently asked questions page. Definitely read through that. It's got some common answers to common questions. One thing that I do need to address, though, is there is a packet of information going around. Looks like this. Does anybody have that packet? Okay. This packet is not from the city. Okay? This is not a city packet. This is not information from the city. This particular packet of information, and I've seen some of it on Facebook as well. This is from a gentleman named Stuart Emmons from Emmons Design. He's got some beautiful pictures in there, but they're not accurate. They don't reflect the concepts that we had tonight. And none of the information in here has been vetted by the DLCD, Dagami, Tom Horning, Chad Sweet, Chief Eddie, or anyone on the committee. So, not saying there's all bad information in here. There might be some good stuff too, but I just need everyone to know it's not from the city. It's from a resident or private citizen, okay? So just to let you know. A few people came up to me before the meeting and asked if this was from the city. So, want to get that straight. So, okay, public feedbacks and question session coming up. We want to hear from you folks. So, here's the deal. People have filled out an information card with Christy. Folks that filled out that card, I'm going to call up each person up to the podium to give public feedback on the record. It'll be on video and on the public record. They can give comments or they can ask questions of the panel. You're only going to get a couple minutes because obviously we got some time constraints. But if you're asking questions of the panel, we'll allow a little more time for a little back and forth, okay? Also, if you have any information, such as packets of information from other people or anything else that you want to include on the public record, you can staple it to that questionnaire. And we will make sure that it gets on the public record, okay? So if there's a point that you need to make or something that's very important to you, you've got to get it on the public record. We want it on the public record. So turn that in with your questionnaire. There's going to be areas on the questionnaire where you can write as much as you want. You can turn around and write on the back too. So we want as much feedback from you as possible on these 3 locations. If you get up and speak tonight, please state your name and mailing address for the record. Each person will have approximately 2 minutes, Chad?
Yep.
Okay. We need to go over a little bit, we can. Also, if you don't like public speaking, like me, we're doing the informal meet and greet afterwards. So we're all going to be here. You guys can ask us as many questions as you want. I'll be here till midnight. If somebody wants to buy me a drink later, that's cool too. Okay, let me get these forms.
Are there any more phones out there that we can collect?
If anyone else needs to fill out a form, just come up to Christy. Also, can I give a round of applause for Christy Ficker, please? So, Christy had a long day today. And thank you very much for being such a great part of this and such a contribution to the community as well. Okay, so first up, to kick things off, we have Mr. Gary Gillum. Gary?
Thank you, Matt. I am on the Firehouse Committee. Our chairman, Jay Speakman, was unable to be here tonight.
Name and mailing address.
Name and mailing address, Gary Gillum, P.O. Box 2621. Jay was unable to be here, out of town on business, and he really regrets that. I'm very glad, though, that Sue Lorraine was able to be here, and we're grateful for her leadership as our council representative. Actually, my involvement with the committee predates Sue, however. John Duncan, who I really wish was here tonight, missed that guy. John Duncan invited me to join me at his office over at Pacific Way one morning and told me about an opportunity to serve, and he represented that a committee was being formed to look into what the council deemed was a priority, and that was building a new fire station, a new public service building. He reminded me that, in fact, the community had voted on a bond measure in 2006 and had been voted down. And so John told me that, in his words, he was grateful that it had been voted down, because at that time, information wasn't even comprehended about the kinds of threats that we've been exposed to tonight. And at that time, it would have been a simple matter of voting to approve to tear down all of this facility and build, as Matt told us, a new civic center. So a new city hall, a new fire station, police station, facilities management building. That was rejected, as John told me, not because we didn't need a new fire station. It was pretty obvious we needed a new fire station. It was obvious to the voters at that time. But the voters rejected the idea of building a new grand, and that pretty much was the term used, grandiose palace of a new civic center for the little town of Gearhart. So John really explained to me that was the reason it was rejected. I went out and did some further research on my own and pretty much found by looking at things like letters to the editor, speaking to some of those people that were still around, that yes, it was well recognized that the fire station that had been built, in 1959 was well beyond its useful period of time. I also talked to Chief Eddy and told him that I was getting involved in this and what did he think about it. And he said, well, he thought it was pretty obvious that we needed a new station for the reasons that he shared tonight. But he also said, but I really wouldn't want to see this effort undertaken if there wasn't an absolute certainty that it would pass. Because these volunteers, this asset that we've got in this community, was really kind of depressed and demoralized by that rejection at that time. So I think that's well worth understanding. So I'm just here to tell you that it's taken me about 3 years or more to get to fully comprehend the information and much more that will be shared with you, that's been shared with you tonight. And it's important, it's critically important that you try to absorb as much of that information as you can, for the simple reason that the decision rests with us. The decision rests with us. It's ultimately not going to happen unless it's passed, and we've got the time, and we're going to take the time to get that information absorbed and your response in a total transparent manner. And I'm grateful for the time to have been involved in this. I've grown in my gratitude for the service of the volunteers, and I've been really grateful for the time to get to know some of my fellow citizens here. And thank you, Matt.
Hey, thank you, Gary. Thanks for all your service on the committee. You guys have all done such an awesome job and worked so hard. Real quick, folks, if you're not sticking around for public feedback and you do need to leave, Christy has your packet with your questionnaire. Please grab that on the way out if you got to take off, okay? And next up, we have Marilyn Gilba.
Another committee member. Oh, whoops. I'm trying to get back. Oh, that's my glasses. All right. Oh, good. Are you timing us? Good, I hope. All right. So I'm Marilyn Gilbach, P.O. Box 2076, and I am a Gearhart Fire News Station Committee member. And I came to this committee with no agenda. I didn't know whether we needed one. All we have to do is look at the ceiling here to understand, and the doors aren't high enough, and it's been a great learning curve for us. And I think that I've been talking to some of the people in our rows, and we want you to understand that our meetings are open. They've always been open. They're posted. When do we meet, Gary? What's our normal? Tuesdays?
First Tuesday of the month.
First
Second
Tuesday, and we welcome your questions, we welcome anything you can bring to us, and I think we've stated that again and again, but I just wanted to make sure that you knew. Also, whenever you see a volunteer fire guy or girl, please thank them. I had no idea. I thought we're talking about tsunami. We're not talking about tsunami, we're talking about day-to-day. And we're awfully lucky to have the good training. We got a fire guy here, a fire guy here, the chief there. We're just so proud of what we get from them. Thanks.
Hey, thanks a lot, Marilyn. Thank you for your service as well. And please, if you ever see the firefighters out and about, please thank them. They really appreciate it, and we do too. Next up, we have my favorite person, Judd Todd. I haven't talked to Judd for a while. You want to talk?
No, I don't think so.
Are you sure? Okay.
What do you mean your favorite person?
Second favorite. Sorry, Marilyn. Thanks for being here, though, Judd. We miss you at the council meetings. Next up, we have Candace Smith. Candace, thanks again for all your help.
Candace Smith, P.O. Box 2863. I'll be real quick. A lot of work has gone into this production tonight. There have been some ill feelings and a lot of information, some of it correct, some of it not correct. I just want to remind you that our little city of Gearhart turned 101 yesterday. That's 101 years of our people coming together to solve problems and look to the future. And I hope we can continue that tradition with figuring out what we need and what we want in our new fire station, etc. Thanks.
Thank you, Candace. Thanks for reminding us too about the birthday. Candace was on our birthday 100th committee for last year, and so she planned a lot of those great events that we did, so thanks for that. Next up, we have Anita Barbie. Hi, come on up.
I have a loud voice.
Well,
We need you here though because the microphone is hooked up to the camera. So we can hear you on there. And, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, before I heard all this.
Name and mailing address.
Oh, Anita Barbie, and I'll give you the, can I give you the, I put it on there.
Yeah, go ahead. Just for
11626 Southwest Military Lane in Portland, because that's where we get our mail. Okay?
Yep, perfect.
Are you
We'll
asked?
keep you in touch. Mike said just.
Okay, the reason I'm up here is because I was concerned, I only understood about one of the sites that was being proposed for the new fire department. And I didn't have any doubts about, after learning a lot about what was going on here and what we need. It sounds like we do definitely need that to be upgraded appropriately. But I was very concerned about Miller Park. I was very fortunate to know Leslie Miller and was one of many, many children who she took under her wings, not just in Gearhart, but in this end of Clatsop County. And she wanted this site that she put together in that park to be available to the public, no matter where people lived. They could come from anywhere and be there and enjoy the ocean. And it was it was just a really wonderful, she was a wonderful person. She included everybody in any kind of entertainment she did in the summer for children. And it was really a treat to be alive when she was alive. And so I'm just saying I would like us to really examine the sites carefully with this. It would be a terrible thing to lose the park if we have the possibility of an alternative that we should look at. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Anita. That was really good information. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Catherine Gimry Wolford.
My family's lived in Clatsop County for 128 years, so I have a deep interest in this area. There's two things I want to just point out, and I do not support the location at the park. And I'm glad we had handouts by someone other than the city. Because when Chad talked about removing a deed restriction, he didn't say what the deed restriction was. And information on Facebook and on the deed said that every part thereof of the park should remain a park and for no other reason. And since it was deeded to the city for this reason, I think it should remain a park. The second point I wanted to make is, I have a question, is where do most of the volunteers for the fire department live?
They live pretty much in Gearhart proper.
In Gearhart proper?
Yeah.
Because,
Gearhart proper, North Sea side.
because on the tsunami map, there's only the green area that's outside the tsunami hazardous zone. and it's not considered as one of the 3 final decisions. But I think it'd be very expensive to spend $6 to $11 million to move the fire station 2 blocks west. And it did not meet or exceed, or if a 500-foot or 50-foot wave came, the mayor even said it may survive a tsunami. What's going to happen when the tsunami comes, it's going to come up Neocoxie Creek. And if this building is 10 feet underwater, how are volunteers going to get to an island? Essentially, 101 is going to be flooded, Neocoxie Creek is going to be flooded all the way up, and I'm not sure, to spend that much money for a station that may not survive a tsunami. I don't think it's worth it. So that's all I have.
Thanks for that, Kathy. And just to remind folks too that when they're looking at the higher locations, the water will recede after 3 or 4 hours. So there will be hopefully some people that get to the station before that, but then definitely after that when there's fires and other emergency stuff too. So definitely take that into account. And next up we have Stuart Emmons here. Stuart? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
Good evening. Thanks for sticking around. My name is Stuart Emmons. My mailing address is 2336 Southwest Osage in Portland. I lived in the North Coast when I was in my early 20s. I've been coming to Gearhart almost every week for the last 40 years. I know Gearhart extremely well. I'm doing projects in Astoria right now. I'm an architect. I have designed 5 fire stations. I have done seismic retrofits. I have talked to Tom Horning, and I really, really appreciate your time enlightening me about tsunamis and earthquakes. I've also been through the Northridge earthquake, which was a 6.7. So I put this folder together, or this handout, because I love Gearhart. I believe that the Leslie Miller Dunes Meadow Park is a key part of Gearhart, and losing it would be a travesty. Some people have said this is misinformation. I would like to know exactly what is misinformation, because
I can answer that after you're done.
okay,
Yeah,
that'd be
for sure.
fine.
Yeah, we'll get to
I've done a lot of research. I have, as you know, have heard, I have an extensive background in fire stations, emergency shelters. I know about earthquakes. I know about tsunamis. I have, my little rendering here was based on, the only information I had was a 12,760 square foot building, so I drew this little aerial at home, and I think I'm pretty darn close to what is going to be, what would happen on this park. Words about subterranean, kind of blind behind the landscape. Well, it won't be subterranean. It's going to be extremely visible. It is going to knock out that park. Just saying, oh, we'll just move the park to the west, it's not the same thing. Having that breathing space up on Marion needs that breathing space, needs the park. I just can't overstate how important the park is for the Gearhart feel. But also, I think in my flyer, there are safer alternatives. I think we need to decouple, quit thinking traditionally like what we do in Portland, saying, okay, we're going to do a fire station that's going to be a shelter, it's going to have emergency operations in it. We ought to decouple those things. Look at assembly areas. Fire stations cannot go up steps. Fire stations have wheels. We ought to think about creative solutions that decouple these elements so we can save the most lives possible in every kind of emergency. Thank you.
sir. Appreciate that. On your drawing of the park, you had 80 parking spots, and the correct landscape model that we showed today had 23. So I just want to make sure people know the difference. Not disputing your data at all. I know you've got a lot of experience, but it wasn't, the information you provided wasn't vetted by our committee or Tom Horning or any of the other folks that the city's worked with for 3 years. So I just want to make sure people understand the difference.
Okay.
Okay?
Sounds good.
Thanks, sir.
Okay. And then we've learned some things about, you know, I know you had that assembly area in the back, and so we've learned some things about that low-lying area down there. Decoupling, I really can't, I think there's some good conversation to be had there. I guess one of the main points is that you drew a red fire truck. That was the only problem I had. Because we've been telling kids at the grade school for 13 years now that the yellow ones are faster. But that was better.
And honestly, too, Stuart, when you hopefully do this as well, because we know what location that you don't like, I also want to know what you like about the other 2 locations, or if you like the other locations as well. And that's one thing I want to stress, guys, is we understand there's definitely some folks that don't like the park location. Hey, we get it, we understand. But I also want to know what locations you do like and why you like them. And, you know, with information that Stuart can provide and other people, please staple that information to this questionnaire. We still want you to rank the stations. You can rank the park 3rd if you want, but we want to know what you think about the other 2 stations, some suggestions on how they could be better. Stuart having some design aspect, architectural ability. We'd love to see what you would think about those locations and possible ideas on what can make those designs better. So please, give us that feedback. Make sure that you fill out the questionnaire. We've got the questionnaires available here. Christy's got them. Please, try to get as many people to fill this questionnaire out as possible. Let them digest the information. We're gonna be doing this over the next 3 months, so there's plenty of time. And with any of you, please review the information. We'll have it up online. We'll send out a link to it. Should have it up by tomorrow afternoon, Thursday, with the video as well. So, just in closing real quick, again, I want to thank everyone for being here. We learned a lot of great stuff tonight. Thank you all for participating. We hope to continue this conversation so that we can help make a decision for the community, and we need your feedback. Okay, next up, we're adjourning the meeting, but we do have a meet and greet, so anybody that wants to talk to any of the experts, we would love to hear from you. Thank you.
How are you? You know, one thing that I was going to comment on, you know, you're getting
What in the hell was waiting at the school?
I don't know.